I worked in a factory for decades. Now I live in a tent by the freeway. My name is Benjamin. I'm 63, and for 32 years I punched the same clock, trained the new guys, never missed more than 5 days. I had my own key, my own door, my own small corner of steady. People think losing everything happens fast. One bad choice, one mistake. It doesn't. It happens in slow motion. First the plant closed. Then the severance ran dry. Then the calls from landlords got shorter. I kept thinking someone would want 32 years of showing up, of knowing how things work. I was wrong. The tent is blue. The freeway never sleeps. Cars pass all night like they're going somewhere I can't follow anymore. Let me take you back to the morning I thought I had time, and the day I learned what happens when decades of work disappear like smoke. When a lifetime of steady isn't enough to keep you steady, what's left to hold on to? The alarm went off at 5:15 a.m., same as it had for 32 years. I rolled out of bed in my studio apartment on Middlebelt Road and started the coffee. Black, no sugar. While it brewed, I pulled on my work clothes, Carhartt jeans, steel-toed boots, the Ford logo shirt I'd earned after my first year on the line. My name is Benjamin Harrington. And this was March 15th, my last day at the Ford transmission plant in Livonia. The closure had been announced 6 weeks ago, but it didn't feel real until I was walking through Gate 3 with my thermos. Hearing my boots echo on the concrete floor for the final time, the plant felt different that morning. Quieter, even though the machines were still running. Guys who usually joked around stood with their hands in their pockets, staring at equipment that would be sold for scrap by summer. I'd trained half these men, shown them how to read the torque specs, how to spot a bad bearing before it seized up the whole line. "You ready for this, Ben?" Marcus Williams asked. He worked the station next to mine, had been there almost as long as I had. His hands were already stained with hydraulic fluid at 6 a.m. "Ready as anyone can be," I said. I wasn't ready. Nobody was. The morning shift supervisor, Dale Peterson, called me over around 8:30. Dale had started as a line worker 15 years ago, back when I was training guys like him. Now he wore a tie and carried a clipboard, but he still remembered what it felt like to work with your hands. "Ben, I need you to break in the new guy on Station 7, he said. "Kid's been here 2 weeks, but he's still shaky on the alignment procedure." The new guy was maybe 25, eager in that way that made me remember my first days at Ford. His name was Kevin, and his hands shook a little when he handled the precision tools. I spent 2 hours showing him the same things I'd shown hundreds of other workers over the years. How to feel for the resistance when the torque wrench hit spec. How to listen for the sound that meant everything was seated right. "It's all about muscle memory," I told him. "Your hands will know before your brain does." Kevin nodded like he was trying to memorize every word. "What are you going to do now, Mr. Harrington? After today, I mean." I looked at the transmission case we were working on. 17 bolts, each one torqued to exactly 89 foot-pounds. I could do it in my sleep. "Find another shop that needs someone who knows his way around a gearbox," I said. 32 years of experience has to count for something. At noon, Dale called us all together for the official ceremony. Plant manager gave a speech about Ford's commitment to American manufacturing, how the Livonia plant had served the company with distinction, how we were all part of the Ford family. Then he handed out the severance packages. Mine was in a manila envelope with my name typed on a white label. Inside, a letter explaining my benefits and a check for $8,400. After taxes, 3 months of rent and groceries if I was careful. Maybe 4 if I was really careful. That I shook hands with guys I'd worked beside for decades. We promised to stay in touch, to let each other know when we found something. But we all knew how these things went. Without the plant to bring us together every morning, we'd drift apart like everything else. That I drove home in my 1998 Honda Civic, the same car I'd been driving to work for 7 years. The radio was playing some song about better days coming, but I switched it off. I wanted quiet to think. My apartment was small but clean. 1 room with a kitchenette, a bathroom barely big enough to turn around in. Rent was $480 a month, which had always felt manageable on my plant salary. Now it felt like a mountain I'd have to climb every 30 days. That I put the severance check on my kitchen table next to a stack of job listings I'd printed at the library. Auto repair shops, parts suppliers, manufacturing companies that might need someone who understood how things fit together. My resume looked solid on paper. 3 decades of experience, perfect attendance record, training certifications I'd earned on my own time. The phone rang around 6 p.m. "Elena," calling from Phoenix. Hi, Dad. How was the last day? Elena was 38, a registered nurse with 2 kids, and a work schedule that would kill a younger person. She'd been sending me $20 here and there when she could, even though I told her not to. It was fine, sweetheart. Got my severance, said my goodbyes. Time to start the next chapter. You sound tired. It's been a long day, but I'm optimistic. A lot of shops around Detroit that could use someone with my experience. We talked for 20 minutes about her kids, about the weather in Phoenix, about anything except the fact that I was 63 years old with arthritis in both hands and no idea what came next. After I hung up, I sat at my kitchen table and looked at the job listings again. Tomorrow I'd start making calls, setting up interviews. Someone would want 32 years of showing up on time and knowing how to fix what was broken. The severance check sat there like a promise. 3 months to figure it out. Maybe 4 if I was smart about spending. Outside my window, I could hear the evening shift workers driving home from the plant. Tomorrow morning, for the first time in 32 years, I wouldn't be joining them. April started with coffee at 5:15 a.m. and 3 job applications before most people ate breakfast. I'd set up a system, print resumes at the library, drive to shops and factories, fill out paperwork in person. The internet was fine, but nothing beat looking a manager in the eye and letting him see you were serious about work. Mike's Auto Repair on Telegraph Road was my first real interview. Mike Kowalski was maybe 50, with hands as stained as mine used to be. His shop specialized in transmission work, which made me think this might be the break I needed. 32 years at Ford, he said, looking at my resume. That's solid experience. You familiar with the newer CVT systems? Learned them when Ford started using them in '08. I said. Tricky at first, but they're not so different once you understand the theory. We walked through his shop. 3 bays, clean and organized, the kind of place where mechanics took pride in their work. Mike showed me a Fusion with transmission problems, asked what I thought. I popped the hood and listened to the engine idle. Sounds like the pump's struggling. Probably low fluid pressure. Could be the valve body, but I checked the filter first. Mike nodded. That's what I was thinking. He shook my hand. Let me talk to my partner. We'll be in touch. I drove home feeling good for the first time since the plant closed. Mike seemed impressed, and his shop was busy enough to need experienced help. I celebrated with a Subway sandwich and called it lunch and dinner. The second interview was at Advanced Auto Parts. Not repair work, but they needed someone for the warehouse who understood automotive systems. The manager, Janet, was younger than Elena but asked good questions. Our customers depend on us to know which part fits which car, she said. Someone with your background could really help our counter staff. I've ordered enough parts over the years to know what works and what doesn't, I said. And I'm good with computers. Had to learn when Ford upgraded their inventory system. Janet seemed interested too. We're interviewing a few more people, but you're definitely in the running. 2 interviews, 2 positive responses. I was starting to think this transition might not be as hard as I'd feared. At home, I spread my bills across the kitchen table and did the math. Rent, utilities, groceries, gas, car insurance. If I was careful, I could stretch the severance to cover 4 months. That should be plenty of time to find something. The landlord, Rick Kowalski, stopped by on the 15th to collect rent. Rick was Mike's cousin, which was how I'd heard about the auto repair job. He was a decent guy, owned 3 rental properties in the neighborhood. How's the job search going? He asked while I wrote the check for $480. Pretty good. Had a couple interviews this week. Think I might have something lined up soon. That's great to hear. You've been a good tenant, Ben. Always on time with the rent. No complaints from the neighbors. After he left, I called Elena to check in. She sounded tired. 12-hour shifts at the hospital were wearing her down. How are the interviews going, Dad? Really well. Had one at an auto shop that went great. Owner seemed impressed with my experience. That's wonderful. I was worried you might have trouble finding something. Why would I have trouble? 32 years of experience doesn't just disappear. But even as I said it, I was starting to wonder. Mike had said he'd be in touch, but it had been a week with no call. Janet from Advanced Auto Parts had gone quiet too. Maybe they were just taking their time, comparing candidates. I filled out more applications. Meyer was hiring for overnight stock crew. McDonald's needed maintenance help. Not the kind of work I'd hoped for, but work was work. I told myself these were backup options, something to fall back on if the better jobs didn't pan out. The Honda was making a noise I didn't like, a knocking sound from somewhere in the engine. I checked the oil, and it looked fine, but the sound was getting worse. A mechanic I used to know from the plant took a listen and shook his head. Sounds like a rod bearing, he said. Could be expensive. How expensive? Depends what else is wrong. Could be 800, could be more. $800 was almost 2 months of rent. I decided to baby the car and hope for the best. Maybe the noise would go away on its own. Maybe I'd have a job by the time it got worse. The first rejection call came on April 28th. Janet from Advanced Auto Parts. Very polite, very sorry. They decided to go with someone who had more retail experience. We were really impressed with your technical knowledge, she said. But we felt the other candidate was a better fit for our customer service needs. I thanked her and hung up. One rejection didn't mean anything. Mike's auto repair was the better opportunity anyway, but Mike didn't call that week either. Or the next up by the end of April, my checking account had dropped to $6,200. Still plenty for a couple more months, but I could see the bottom from here. The Honda's knocking was getting louder, and my arthritis was acting up in the spring rain that I printed more applications at the library and tried to stay optimistic. Someone had to need 32 years of experience. Someone had to see the value in a worker who showed up every day and took pride in doing things right. The phone rang while I was updating my resume. For a second, I thought it might be Mike calling with good news that IT was Rick Kowalski, my landlord. He wanted to remind me that May rent was due tomorrow. The call from Mike's auto repair came on May 8th, just as I was getting ready for an interview at Jiffy Lube. I'd been waiting 3 weeks to hear back, checking my phone every hour like a teenager waiting for a girl to call. Ben, it's Mike. I wanted to thank you for coming in. Really impressed with your experience. My heart jumped. This was it. 32 years of experience paying off. We decided to go with someone else, he continued. Guy's been doing transmission work for 20 years, and he's a little younger. Nothing personal, just felt like he might be a better long-term investment. Younger. There it was. I was 63 with gray hair and hands that ached on cold mornings. Mike probably figured I had 5 years left in me, maybe less. Why train someone who'd be retiring soon when you could hire someone with 20 years ahead of him? I understand, I said. Thanks for considering me. You're a good man, Ben. Someone's gonna be lucky to get you. But would they? I was starting to wonder. The Jiffy Lube interview went exactly like I expected. The manager was maybe 30, looked at my resume like he was reading a foreign language. 32 years at Ford didn't mean much when you were talking about 10-minute oil changes and upselling air fresheners. We're really looking for someone with quick lube experience, he said. This is a fast-paced environment. We do a car every 8 minutes during rush hour. I can learn, I said. I'm good with my hands, good with customers. Let me talk to my district manager. We'll be in touch. We both knew he wouldn't be in touch that I drove to McDonald's next. They were hiring for maintenance, which seemed more promising than flipping burgers. The manager, Ashley, was young enough to be my granddaughter. She looked at my application like she was trying to solve a puzzle. You've got a lot of experience, she said, but it's all automotive. This job is more about cleaning floors, fixing broken equipment, basic plumbing. I can do that. Worked on plenty of equipment at Ford. Hydraulics, pneumatics, electrical systems. The pay is $8.25 an hour to start. 25 hours a week, maybe 30 if you're flexible about shifts. $8.25 an hour. At Ford, I'd made $23 an hour plus benefits. Even working full-time at McDonald's, I'd make less in a month than I used to make in a week. Let me think about it, I said. Ashley shrugged. Sure, but we're interviewing other people too. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with a calculator and a pile of bills. Rent, utilities, groceries, car insurance, gas. The minimum was $1,100 a month just to survive. Even if McDonald's gave me 30 hours a week, I'd bring home maybe $900 after taxes. Not enough to live on, but better than nothing. My checking account was down to $5,400. The severance was disappearing faster than I'd expected. Gas for driving to interviews, new clothes for looking professional, little expenses I hadn't budgeted for. At this rate, I had 3 months left before the money ran out completely. Elena called while I was staring at the numbers. How's the job search going, Dad? I thought about telling her the truth. That younger meant better. That 32 years of experience was starting to feel like 32 years of being out of date. That I was applying to McDonald's and getting looked at like I didn't belong there either. Still working on it, I said. Had a few interviews this week. Waiting to hear back. I'm sure something will come through. With your experience, someone's bound to snap you up. That's what I keep telling myself. After we hung up, I walked to the mire down the street. They had a hiring sign in the window. Overnight stock crew, $9 an hour. I took an application to the customer service desk and filled it out right there. The woman behind the counter was maybe my age, with tired eyes and a name tag that said, Dorothy, you looking for full-time work? She asked, whatever's available. She looked at my application. A lot of experience for stocking shelves. Work is work, I said. Dorothy nodded like she understood. Manager's in tomorrow morning if you want to come back around 10. I walked home feeling like I'd crossed some invisible line. 6 weeks ago, I was a skilled tradesman with 3 decades of experience. Now I was grateful for the chance to stock shelves for $9 an hour. The Honda's knocking was getting worse. I'd been putting off dealing with it, hoping it would hold together until I found steady work. But every time I started the engine, the sound was louder and more persistent that I called my old mechanic friend Jimmy. He agreed to take a look without charging for the diagnosis. Rod bearings going, he confirmed. Maybe the main bearing too. You're looking at a complete engine rebuild. How much? $800 if you're lucky. Could be $1,200 if there's more damage. $1,200. That was more than I had left in checking after this month's rent. Even $800 would wipe me out. How long before it completely dies? I asked. Jimmy listened to the engine knock. Hard to say. Could be next week. Could be next month. I wouldn't take it on any long trips. I thanked him and drove home very carefully, staying under 35 and trying not to think about what would happen when the Honda finally gave up that night. The phone rang at 10 p.m. It was Rick Kowalski. Ben, sorry to call so late. Just wanted to remind you that rent's due tomorrow. I know you've been dealing with the job situation. I'll have it to you, I said. Everything okay? You sound stressed. I looked around my studio apartment. Clean, quiet. Mine for another month if I could scrape together $480. After that, who knew? Just tired, I said. It's been a long day. But after I hung up, I realized Rick's tone was different. More careful, like he was already wondering if he'd need to start the eviction process. June rent was due, and I had $4,100 left in checking. Not enough. I stared at my toolbox in the corner. 30 years of accumulated wrenches, sockets, specialty equipment. Snap-on tools I'd saved months to buy. Each one chosen for a specific job I'd mastered over the decades. Tony's pawn shop on 8 Mile looked exactly like what it was. Barred windows. Flickering neon sign. The smell of desperation and cigarettes. Tony himself was maybe 60, wearing a Detroit Tigers shirt with permanent sweat stains that I laid my tools across his counter like I was displaying my life's work. Torque wrenches, socket sets, digital calipers, impact drivers. Everything organized in foam cutouts. Each tool in its place. What are you looking to get? Tony asked, barely glancing at the collection. These are Snap-on tools. Professional grade. Paid over $3,000 for everything here. Tony picked up my favorite ratchet, the one I'd carried for 15 years. Tested the mechanism, set it down. Best I can do is 180. 180? These tools are worth. They're worth what someone's willing to pay. You want 180 or not? I needed the money. June rent was $480, and even with the tool money, I'd be cutting it close. But watching Tony count out 9 $20 bills felt like selling pieces of myself. The walk home in 85-degree heat took 40 minutes. I'd stopped driving to interviews to save gas money. My interview shirt was soaked with sweat by the time I reached the auto parts store, and I could see the manager's expression change when he saw me walk in. You the guy who called about the counter position? Yes, sir. Benjamin Harrington. He looked me up and down, sweaty, 63, desperate. We filled that position yesterday. Sorry. That night, I split a can of Chef BRD into 2 meals. Ate half cold, saved the rest for tomorrow. The math was getting simpler and scarier. Even if I found minimum wage work tomorrow, I couldn't afford to live here anymore. My phone buzzed. Text from Elena. Hey Dad, how's everything going? I stared at the message for 10 minutes before typing back. Good. Still looking but confident something will work out soon. The lie tasted worse than the cold ravioli. Rick called the next morning. His voice was different, formal, careful. Ben, we need to talk about July rent. I know you're going through a rough patch. I'll have it, I said. Maybe a few days late, but I'll have it. Long pause. I hope so. I really do. But I've got bills too, you know. After he hung up, I knew what was coming. Rick was a decent guy, but decent guys still had mortgages to pay. The eviction notice would be coming soon. The pawn shop had my wedding ring now too. Martha's engagement ring, the one I'd saved 3 months to buy when we got married 38 years ago. Tony offered me $40 for it, and I took it without arguing. $40 plus the 20 I had left meant $60 total. Not enough for July rent. Not enough for anything that mattered. Rick knocked on my door July 10th. Not angry, just tired. He held a manila folder in his hands like a doctor carrying bad news. Ben, I'm sorry. I really am. But I can't carry you anymore. The eviction notice was typed on legal paper, official and final. 30 days to vacate the premises. Rick helped me tape it to my door while Mrs. Chun from next door watched through her window. You got anywhere to go? Rick asked that. I thought about Elena in Phoenix, working double shifts to support 2 kids. Thought about the shame of calling my daughter to say her father was homeless. I'll figure something out, I said. Rick squeezed my shoulder. You're a good man. This economy, it's not your fault. But it felt like my fault. Felt like 32 years of showing up early and staying late should have added up to more than this. That night, I packed everything that mattered into 2 garbage bags. Clothes, a few photos, my birth certificate, and social security card. Everything else, the furniture, the dishes, the life I'd built in this small space, would stay behind. That I'd been sleeping in my Honda for 3 days when the engine finally gave up. Started it in the McDonald's parking lot on July 28th, and instead of the familiar knock, there was a grinding sound like metal eating itself alive. Steam poured from under the hood. The temperature gauge pegged red. Jimmy had been right about the rod bearings. The tow truck driver was sympathetic but professional. Where you want it towed? How much to fix it? He looked under the hood, shook his head. More than it's worth. This car's done. What about the impound lot? $50 a day. After 30 days, they auction it off. I didn't have $50. Didn't have 30 days. I cleaned out my personal items, phone charger, change of clothes, the last photo of Martha, and watched them tow away my last connection to the working world. Walking through Detroit in July heat with 2 garbage bags, I felt invisible. People looked right through me like I was already gone. A woman at the bus stop moved her purse when I sat down. A security guard at the library watched me like I might steal something. That I'd heard about the camp under the I-96 overpass. Seen the tents from the highway when I still had a car to drive. Never thought I'd be walking toward them with everything I owned in plastic bags. Marcus Williams was sitting on a milk crate when I approached the camp. Black guy, maybe 45, with the kind of eyes that had seen everything twice. You knew? He asked. Yeah. Got somewhere to sleep. I looked at the collection of tents, tarps, and makeshift shelters clustered against the concrete embankment. Working on it. Marcus stood up. Come on. Let me show you how this works. Marcus walked me through the unwritten rules like he was training a new employee. Stay with the group. Cops were less likely to roust a whole camp. Keep your area clean. One person's mess brought trouble for everyone. No drugs, no drinking, no fighting where the police could see. How long you been here? I asked. 2 years. Lost my job at the Chrysler plant. Couldn't find anything else. Wife left, took the kids. He said it matter of fact, like reciting a grocery list. The blue Coleman tent cost me $30 at a pawn shop on Grand River. Last $30 I had. Marcus helped me set it up against the concrete wall, showed me how to use rocks and rebar to anchor it against the wind. First night's always the hardest, he said. After that, you just get used to it. I crawled into the tent at 9 p.m. and tried to get comfortable on the hard ground. Above me, 18-wheelers rumbled across the overpass every few minutes, making the earth shake. The sound was constant, mechanical, like sleeping inside an engine. I thought about Elena, 3 time zones away, probably putting her kids to bed. Thought about the lies I'd told her, how proud I'd sounded talking about job prospects and new opportunities. How could I call her now? How could I say the words, "Your father is homeless"? Sleep came in fragments between truck noise and police sirens. I woke up every hour, checking my phone for the time, counting the minutes until dawn at 5:30 a.m., flashlights cut through the tent walls. Voices shouting, "Police! Pack it up. You've got 10 minutes." I scrambled out of my sleeping bag, stuffing everything into the garbage bags while cops in riot gear watched. Other campers moved with practiced efficiency, breaking down their lives in minutes. "Where are we supposed to go?" Someone asked. "Not my problem," the sergeant said. This is city property. You can't camp here. We scattered like roaches when the lights come on. I carried my bags 6 blocks to a parking lot behind a closed gas station, set up again in the shadow of a dumpster. 2 hours later, security guards moved us along. This was the routine, I learned. Set up, get roused, move, repeat. Like a shell game where everyone lost, the library became my office. Free internet, clean bathrooms, air conditioning. I applied for jobs on the public computers, used their address for applications since I didn't have one anymore, but sitting in the library for 8 hours a day, wearing the same clothes, showering in gas station bathrooms. People could tell. Librarians watched me carefully. Other patrons moved to different tables when I sat down. I was becoming invisible in a different way now. Not just unemployed, but homeless. Not just poor, but untouchable. Marcus found me at the library one afternoon. You eating? I hadn't eaten since yesterday. Pride kept me from asking for help, but hunger was stronger than pride. Salvation Army serves dinner at 6, he said. No questions asked. The soup kitchen was everything I'd imagined and worse. Fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, the smell of industrial disinfectant and unwashed bodies. Men and women lined up with plastic trays, grateful for whatever they got. I stood in that line feeling like I'd crossed the final bridge between my old life and this new one. Benjamin Harrington, skilled tradesman, had become just another hungry person waiting for charity. The woman serving food had kind eyes. First time? Yes, ma'am. It gets easier, she said, ladling soup into a bowl. And there's no shame in needing help. But shame was all I felt. Eating donated food while traffic roared overhead and my daughter thought I was rebuilding my life instead of watching it disappear completely. October meant cold mornings and arthritic hands that wouldn't work right until noon. I'd been homeless for 2 months, and my body was keeping score. Sleeping on concrete, carrying everything I owned, walking miles every day. 63-year-old joints weren't built for this kind of life. The tent stayed damp no matter what I did. Michigan autumn brought rain that soaked through everything, and there was nowhere to get truly dry. My clothes smelled like mildew and defeat. My hands stayed grimy no matter how often I washed them in gas station bathrooms. The day shelter on Cass Avenue opened at 8 a.m. 20 beds, first come, first served. I learned to get there by 7:30, stand in line with men who'd become my neighbors in this invisible city. We didn't talk much. Shame had a way of making people quiet. Inside, fluorescent lights buzzed overhead while we sat in plastic chairs and waited for nothing. Social workers offered help with paperwork, job applications, housing assistance that might come through in 6 months if we were lucky. I filled out forms with my library address, knowing the chances were slim. Employment history, the caseworker asked. Her name was Jennifer, maybe 30, with the kind of optimism that hadn't been beaten down yet. 32 years at Ford. Transmission assembly. She looked up from her computer. That's solid experience. What happened? Plant closed. Couldn't find anything else. Jennifer typed notes. There are programs for displaced auto workers. Retraining opportunities, job placement services. I'm 63. Who's going to retrain me? She didn't have an answer for that. The library computers showed 3 new job postings that day. All required experience I didn't have or paid wages I couldn't live on. I applied anyway, typing cover letters on a keyboard that was missing the E key. Walking back to the camp, I passed my old apartment building. A young couple was moving into my unit, their car full of furniture and hope, probably excited about their first place together. I wanted to warn them how quickly everything could disappear, but I kept walking. My phone buzzed. Elena, calling right on schedule. Hey Dad, how's the job search going? I stood under a street light, garbage bags at my feet, trying to sound like the man she remembered. Still working on it. Had a few interviews this week. That's great. What kind of companies? I scrambled for believable lies. Automotive suppliers, mostly. Using my Ford experience. I'm so proud of you for staying positive. I know this transition is hard. Transition. Like it was temporary, like I was between one good thing and another instead of falling through the cracks. How are the kids? I asked, changing the subject. Elena talked about Jessica's soccer games and Michael's science project while I watched other homeless men setting up their tents for the night. She painted pictures of normal life, homework and bedtime stories and arguments over vegetables, while I calculated whether I had enough quarters for the laundromat. I love you, Dad. Love you too, sweetheart. After she hung up, I sat on the concrete and cried for the first time since Martha died. Not because I was homeless, but because I was lying to the one person who still believed in me. Marcus found me there an hour later. Rough day. My daughter thinks I'm rebuilding my career. Thinks I'm staying positive and pursuing opportunities. Why don't you tell her the truth? Because she's working double shifts to support 2 kids. Because she sends me $20 when she doesn't have $20 to spare. Because I'm supposed to be the father who takes care of things, not the other way around. Marcus sat down beside me. Pride's expensive, Ben. Sometimes you can't afford it. But I wasn't ready to give up pride yet. It was the last thing I had left from the man I used to be. The temperature dropped below freezing that night. I wore every piece of clothing I owned and still shivered until dawn. Hand warmers from the dollar store helped for a few hours, but the cold settled into my bones and stayed there. At 5 a.m., police flashlights woke us up again. Same routine, same rush to pack everything and disappear before they started making arrests. Where do you think we should go? A new guy asked. He was maybe 50, still soft around the edges, still expecting the system to make sense. Marcus and I looked at each other. After 2 months, I was becoming a veteran of this life I'd never wanted to understand. Same place as always, I said. Anywhere they'll let us exist until they won't. November brought the kind of cold that made my arthritis feel like broken glass in my joints. Hand warmers and extra socks weren't enough anymore. I needed real shelter, but the waiting list at the downtown mission stretched 2 weeks out. The system had rules I was still learning. Show up at 4 p.m. for the lottery. Bring ID and proof you weren't drunk or high. Follow regulations about personal belongings, bedtime, wake-up calls. No fighting, no stealing, no staying past 7 a.m. unless you were sick enough for the nurse to see. First time, the intake worker asked. His name tag said David, and he looked tired in the way that came from seeing this every day. Yes. He handed me a clipboard thick with forms. Emergency contact? I thought about Elena. About calling her to say I was sleeping in a homeless shelter. That her father had become the kind of person she'd driven past without really seeing. I'll leave it blank for now. David nodded like he'd heard that before. We've got 17 beds tonight. 23 people on the list. We'll call numbers at 5:30. I sat in the waiting room with men who looked like me. Clean enough to pass, tired enough to accept charity. The guy next to me was maybe 40, wearing a suit jacket with holes in the elbows. You been here before? He asked. No. You. Every night for 3 weeks. Lost my apartment when the restaurant closed. Figured I'd find something quick, but he shrugged. Turns out nobody wants to hire a 50-year-old cook. At 5:30, David called 12 numbers. Mine wasn't one of them. Better luck tomorrow, he said. Doors open at 4. Back under the overpass, the temperature dropped to 26 degrees. I put on every piece of clothing I owned, crawled into my sleeping bag, and tried to survive until dawn. The concrete pulled heat from my body no matter what I did. Around 2 a.m., I gave up trying to sleep. Walked to the 24-hour McDonald's on 8 Mile, bought a coffee with quarters, and sat in a booth until they kicked me out at 5 a.m. The next day, I was number 7 on the shelter list. Got a bed in a room with 15 other men, each of us pretending we weren't listening to each other breathe. The bed was narrow but warm. Clean sheets, a thin pillow that smelled like industrial detergent. I lay there thinking about my apartment, about sleeping alone with no one snoring or sleep-talking to keep me awake. At 6 a.m., lights came on and voices told us to pack up. I'd had maybe 4 hours of real sleep, but it was enough to remember what rest felt like. The shower was 3 minutes of lukewarm water, but standing under it felt like luxury. I hadn't been truly clean in weeks. Scrubbed my hair with donated shampoo, watched dirt swirl down the drain to eye in the mirror. I barely recognized myself. 63 years old, 30 pounds lighter than when the plant closed, eyes that looked like I'd seen too much. This was the man Elena would see if she ever visited. This was who I'd become. You clean up good, Marcus said. He'd gotten a bed too, was shaving with a disposable razor at the sink next to mine. Feel almost human again. Don't get used to it. Tomorrow we might be back outside. But I was getting used to it. The rhythm of homelessness, the small victories of warmth and food and safety. I was adapting to a life I'd never imagined, and that scared me more than the cold at the library. I checked my email on the public computer. 3 job rejections, all form letters thanking me for my interest. One message from Elena asking how I was doing. When we could talk next. I started typing a response 6 different times. Everything's fine. Still looking for the right opportunity. Staying positive. All lies. All easier than the truth. Finally, I wrote, things are challenging right now, but I'm managing. Love you. It was the closest I'd come to honesty in months, and it still wasn't close enough. That afternoon, a woman at the library approached my table. Middle-aged, kind face, carrying a clipboard. Excuse me, are you Benjamin Harrington? My heart stopped. Had Elena hired someone to find me? Had the police been looking for me? Yes. I'm Sarah from Catholic Charities. Your name came up on our housing assistance list. Do you have a few minutes to talk? Housing assistance. The forms I'd filled out weeks ago, when I still believed in systems and solutions. What kind of assistance? We have a transitional housing program. 6 months in a studio apartment while you get back on your feet. It's not much, but it's yours. I stared at her, waiting for the catch. There was always a catch. What do I need to do? Show up Monday morning with your ID and social security card. Be ready to move in that day. After she left, I sat in the library until closing time, trying to process what had happened. A room of my own. A door with a lock. An address I could put on job applications. Maybe this was the break I needed. Maybe I could rebuild from here. The studio apartment was 12 feet by 15 feet in a converted motel on Gresham Avenue. Thin walls, carpet that had seen better decades, a kitchenette with a hot plate and a mini fridge that hummed like it was dying. After 3 months of sleeping on concrete, it looked like paradise. Rent's covered for 6 months, Sarah explained as she handed me the key. After that, you'll need to be paying your own way. Utilities included, but you're responsible for phone and cable if you want them. I stood in the doorway holding everything I owned in 2 garbage bags. My own space. My own bathroom. A bed with an actual mattress instead of the concrete that had been cracking my ribs for months. There's a job placement counselor who'll work with you, Sarah continued. His name's Mike Rodriguez. He specializes in helping older workers transition back into employment. Mike turned out to be about 40, with the kind of patient energy that suggested he'd had this conversation hundreds of times. His office was in the same building, 3 doors down from my apartment. Tell me about your work history, he said, pulling out a thick folder that I explained about Ford, about the plant closure, about the months of applications and rejections. Mike took notes, nodding at all the right places. The automotive industry's been rough, he said, but there are other options. Manufacturing, warehousing, maintenance work. Have you considered broadening your search? I've applied everywhere. Nobody wants to hire a 63-year-old. Age discrimination is real, but it's not impossible. We just need to position your experience differently. Mike helped me rewrite my resume, focusing on skills instead of years. Problem solving, training, reliability. Made 32 years at Ford sound like an asset instead of a liability. I've got connections at a few companies, he said. Let me make some calls. Having an address changed everything. I could apply for jobs online without using the library's computers. Could list a phone number where employers could actually reach me. Could shower every morning in my own bathroom and wear clean clothes to interviews. The first real opportunity came from a warehouse in Taylor. Forklift operator, $12 an hour, full-time. Mike had talked to the hiring manager, explained my situation without making it sound like charity. We need someone reliable, the manager said during the interview. His name was Steve, maybe 50, with the kind of handshake that suggested he'd worked his way up from the floor. 32 years of perfect attendance at Ford. I said, I know how to show up. Steve smiled. When can you start? December 1st, my first day of work in 8 months. The warehouse was huge, cold, filled with auto parts bound for dealerships across the Midwest. My job was moving pallets from receiving to shipping, 8 hours a day of driving a forklift through narrow aisles. It wasn't skilled work, but it was honest work. My hands remembered how to operate machinery, how to read inventory sheets, how to work as part of a team. For 8 hours a day, I felt like Benjamin Harrington again instead of just another homeless guy grateful for handouts. The paycheck was $384 after taxes. Not enough to rent a real apartment, but enough to buy groceries without counting quarters. Enough to stop lying to Elena about how I was doing. I called her that night, sitting on my narrow bed with my first real paycheck in months. Dad, how are you? Better. I found work. That's wonderful. Tell me about it. I explained about the warehouse, about Mike Rodriguez, about the apartment program. I told her about the cold months under the overpass, about sleeping in shelters, about learning what invisible felt like. Elena cried when I told her the truth. Why didn't you call me? I would have helped. You were already helping 2 kids on a nurse's salary. I couldn't ask for more. You're my father. You don't ask for help, you just get it. We talked for an hour about pride and shame and the distance between needing help and accepting it, about the lies I'd told and the truth I'd been afraid to share. I want you to come to Phoenix, she said, after your program ends. Come stay with us while you get back on your feet. 6 months. That's how long I had to save money, prove I could work again, rebuild something resembling a normal life. 6 months to become the kind of grandfather her kids deserved instead of the cautionary tale I'd almost become. The warehouse work was hard on my arthritis, but it was work. Steve treated me like any other employee, no special consideration for my age or my story. Just expectations and respect, which was all I'd ever wanted. A tea lunch break. I sat with the other workers and felt like I belonged somewhere again. We talked about overtime schedules and weekend plans, normal complaints about normal jobs. Nobody asked where I lived or how I'd ended up here. But every morning, walking past the overpass where I'd spent those months, I saw Marcus and the others still setting up their tents in the shadow of the highway. Still invisible, still hoping for a break like the one I'd gotten. I stopped sometimes, brought coffee or sandwiches when I could afford it. Marcus always asked how the job was going, genuinely happy for my success. You give the rest of us hope, he said one morning. Proof that this doesn't have to be permanent. But I knew how close permanent could be. How quickly everything solid could turn to dust and blow away. How many good men were still sleeping on concrete while I had a roof and a paycheck? The difference between them and me wasn't effort or character or virtue. It was luck and timing and a social worker named Sarah who happened to have my name on a list. That scared me more than the cold ever had. February marked 6 months at the warehouse and the beginning of real decisions. My transitional housing would end in April, and I needed $800 for a security deposit plus first month's rent if I wanted to stay in Detroit. On warehouse wages, that meant another year of saving. Another year of living in a 12 by 15 room that felt smaller every day. Elena's offer to come to Phoenix sat in my thoughts like an unfinished conversation. Start over at 63, 3 time zones away from everything familiar. Live with my daughter and her kids until I could afford my own place. If I could afford my own place. What do you think? I asked Mike Rodriguez during one of our monthly check-ins. Detroit's tough for guys our age, he said. Limited opportunities, high cost of living relative to wages. Phoenix might give you more options. I've never lived anywhere but Michigan. Sometimes change is good. Sometimes it's necessary. The warehouse job was steady but dead-end. $12 an hour with no benefits, no chance for advancement. At 63, I was exactly where I'd be at 70 if nothing changed. Loading trucks, moving pallets, collecting a paycheck that covered survival, but not much else. Steve called me into his office on a Thursday morning. I thought maybe I was getting fired, or maybe hurt someone's feelings with one of my old man complaints about the radio volume. Ben, I wanted to talk to you about something, he said. We're expanding the operation, bringing in more automation. Going to need fewer forklift operators. My stomach dropped. Not again. Not when I was finally getting stable. Are you laying me off? Not yet, but probably by summer. I wanted to give you time to prepare. Time to prepare. Like 8 months was enough warning to rebuild a career that had already been destroyed once. That night, I called Elena from my narrow room, staring at the wall I'd been staring at for 3 months. I've been thinking about your offer, I said. To come to Phoenix? What about your job? I explained about the automation, about the layoffs coming, about being 63 in an economy that preferred younger workers. Come now, she said. Don't wait until you're unemployed again. Jessica and Michael would love to spend time with their grandfather. I can't afford the bus ticket. I'll send you money. Tonight, if you want. Pride stirred in my chest, that old familiar resistance to needing help. But pride had nearly killed me under the overpass. Pride had kept me from calling my daughter when I first lost my apartment. Okay, I said. Yes, I'd like to come to Phoenix. Elena cried a little. Happy tears, relief tears. You'll love it here, Dad. Sunshine, warm weather. The kids can't wait to meet you. 2 weeks later, I was packing my life into the same 2 garbage bags I'd carried into homelessness. Not much more than I'd started with, but somehow it felt like progress. Marcus came to see me off at the Greyhound station. He looked older, more weathered, like the winter had taken something permanent from him. "You sure about this?" he asked. "Not sure about anything. But staying here means waiting for the next disaster." He handed me a folded piece of paper. "My sister's number in Phoenix. If things don't work out with your daughter, call her. She might be able to help." I hugged Marcus goodbye. This man who'd taught me how to survive when survival was all I had left. He was still living under the overpass, still hoping for his own break, still helping newcomers learn the rules of being invisible. The bus pulled away from Detroit at 6 p.m., carrying me toward a future I couldn't picture. Through the window, I watched the city disappear, the closed factories, the empty lots, the overpass where I'd learned what rock bottom actually looked like. 36 hours to Phoenix. Time to think about second chances and new beginnings, and whether a man my age could really start over. Time to figure out how to be a grandfather instead of a cautionary tale. How to rebuild trust with a daughter who'd never stopped believing in me, even when I'd stopped believing in myself. The landscape changed outside the window. Michigan winter gave way to southern sun. Flat land stretched toward mountains I'd only seen in pictures. Every mile was distance from the worst 8 months of my life, and distance from the man who'd learned to sleep on concrete and be grateful for soup kitchen meals that I dozed somewhere in New Mexico and dreamed about Martha. About the life we'd planned before cancer took her away. Woke up thinking she might have approved of this choice. This leap toward family instead of stubborn independence. The bus rolled through Arizona desert toward a granddaughter who played soccer and a grandson who built science projects. Toward a daughter who worked double shifts and still found room in her house for a father who'd lost his way. Toward whatever came next for Benjamin Harrington. Former Ford worker, former homeless man, future grandfather trying to figure out how to be useful again. Phoenix hit me like stepping into an oven. March in Arizona was hotter than Michigan summer, dry heat that made my sinuses ache and my skin feel like paper. Elena met me at the Greyhound station, looking older than I remembered, but smiling like she'd won something important. "Dad." She hugged me hard, and I could feel her checking. Was I thinner? Sicker? Different somehow from the man who used to fix her bike and teach her to drive? "You look good." I lied. She looked exhausted, worn down by shift work and single motherhood. The drive through Phoenix surprised me. Clean streets, palm trees, mountains rising purple in the distance. Nothing like Detroit's industrial sprawl or the gray concrete overpass I'd called home. "The kids are at school," Elena said. "Jessica has soccer practice until 5. Michael gets out at 3:30. They're excited to meet their grandfather." Grandfather. The word felt foreign. I'd been so many things lately. Unemployed, homeless, warehouse worker, that I'd forgotten about being family. Elena's apartment was small but bright. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a living room with a couch that would become my bed. Clean, organized, the kind of place where people planned for tomorrow instead of just surviving today. "It's not much," she said, "but it's home." It was everything. For walls, a door that locked, windows that let in light instead of rain. After months of concrete and uncertainty, it felt like luxury. She showed me the bathroom, my own towel on a hook, shampoo she'd bought specifically for me. The refrigerator had actual food instead of whatever charity was serving. The couch had pillows and blankets that belonged to me for as long as I needed them. "I cleared some dresser space," Elena said. "And there's room in the closet for your things." My things. 2 garbage bags of clothes that smelled like industrial detergent and disappointment. But she said it like I was bringing treasures, like my presence was a gift instead of a burden. That afternoon, while Elena was at the hospital, I sat on her couch and tried to remember how to live inside walls. How to exist in a space where police wouldn't wake me up, where I could leave my belongings without fear of theft or confiscation. The quiet was the hardest part. No traffic overhead, no voices arguing, no constant noise of survival. Just air conditioning and the distant sound of children playing in a courtyard. For the first time in 8 months, I felt safe enough to sleep without listening for footsteps. Jessica burst through the door at 5:30 like a small hurricane. Grass stains on her knees and ponytail askew from soccer practice. 8 years old, with Elena's eyes and energy I'd forgotten children could have. "Are you Grandpa Ben?" she asked, stopping 3 feet away to study me. I am. You must be Jessica. She tilted her head. Mom says you lived in Michigan where it snows. Did you ever build a snowman? Lots of snowmen. Maybe I'll show you pictures sometime. Michael arrived 20 minutes later, all arms and legs and 12-year-old skepticism. Hung his backpack by the door and nodded politely when Elena introduced us. How long are you staying? He asked. Direct question. I like that about him. We're still figuring that out. I said. How long do you think I should stay? He shrugged. Mom works a lot. Jessica talks too much. Might get annoying. Michael, Elena warned, but I laughed. Fair enough. I'll try not to get in the way. Dinner was spaghetti and garlic bread, nothing fancy, but eaten at a table with real plates and conversation about homework and weekend plans. Normal family chaos, the kind I'd forgotten existed. Jessica chattered about soccer team drama and her best friend's birthday party. Michael explained his science project about renewable energy with the intensity of a college professor. Elena listened to both while managing schedules and logistics with practiced efficiency. Grandpa Ben, Jessica said, do you know how to braid hair? Can't say I do. Mom's too tired after work. My hair gets all tangled. I looked at Elena, seeing the exhaustion she tried to hide. Working 12-hour shifts to support 2 kids, managing everything alone because their father had decided fatherhood was optional. I could learn, I said. How hard can it be? After dinner, Jessica brought me her hairbrush and a handful of elastic bands. Sat cross-legged on the floor while I figured out the mechanics of French braids from a YouTube video on Elena's phone. My arthritis made it clumsy work, but Jessica was patient. Gave instructions like a tiny drill sergeant. Tied her on the left side. No, the other left. That's good, Grandpa. Michael pretended not to watch from the kitchen table, but I caught him smiling when Jessica declared my work almost perfect. Tomorrow, I'll teach you the fishtail braid, she announced. Looking forward to it. Elena was washing dishes when I joined her in the kitchen. Thank you, she said quietly. For what? For being here. For braiding her hair. For letting them be kids with their grandfather instead of worrying about adult problems. I dried plates while she washed, finding rhythm in the ordinary task. I should be thanking you. You saved my life by bringing me here. Family saves family, she said. That's what we do. Outside, Phoenix settled into evening with temperatures that would have been summer heat in Michigan. Inside, I was learning to be useful again. Learning to matter to people who shared my DNA and my stubborn streak. Learning to be someone worth saving. My first Arizona job interview was at a hardware store in Scottsdale. The manager, Dave, was maybe 45 with calloused hands and the patient demeanor of someone who'd worked retail long enough to appreciate experience over enthusiasm. 32 years in automotive, he said, scanning my resume. That's good problem-solving experience. Customers come in here with broken things, need someone who can figure out solutions. The store was clean, organized, busy enough to suggest steady work. Better than warehouse wages, regular hours that would let me help with homework and soccer practice. When can you start? Dave asked. Tomorrow if you need me. How about Monday? Give you time to get settled. Elena cried when I told her about the job. Happy tears mixed with relief that her father might actually rebuild instead of just survive. $12.50 an hour, I said. Plus benefits after 90 days. Should be enough to start looking for my own place soon. Don't rush that, she said. The kids are getting attached to having you around. Truth was, I was getting attached too. To Jessica's constant chatter about everything that crossed her mind. To Michael's careful questions about engines and machines, testing whether his grandfather really knew how things worked. To Elena's grateful smile when she came home to homework already finished and dinner started. The hardware store felt like coming home. Customers brought broken faucets and worn-out lawnmowers, problems I could solve with the right part and clear instructions. Dave let me reorganize the automotive section, appreciated my ability to explain technical concepts in language anyone could understand. You're good with people, he said after my first week. Customers trust you. That's worth a lot in this business. Trust. I'd forgotten what it felt like to earn it honestly, to be valued for knowledge instead of pitted for circumstances. Evenings became routine. Helped Jessica with math homework. Listened to Michael explain whatever scientific concept had captured his imagination that day. Elena would come home exhausted but smiling, finding dinner ready and children who'd finished their responsibilities. You don't have to do all this, she said one night. finding me folding laundry while she worked a 16-hour shift. I want to pull my weight. You're doing more than that. You're being the grandfather they've never had. Their father had left when Michael was 7, moved to California, and became someone who sent birthday cards but missed recitals. I couldn't fix that damage, but I could show up consistently, be present in ways their father had chosen not to be. Saturdays meant soccer games in heat that would have killed me in Michigan. Jessica played midfielder with fearless aggression, diving for balls twice her size. I sat in aluminum bleachers, cheering louder than parents half my age. She gets that competitiveness from you, Elena said during halftime. From me? The way you never gave up. Even when everything fell apart, you kept trying. I wasn't sure that was true. Felt more like stubbornness than courage, pride disguised as perseverance. But watching Jessica fight for every ball, seeing her determination to improve, I recognized something familiar. Maybe what looked like failure from the inside looked different from the outside. Maybe surviving was its own kind of success. After the game, Jessica ran over with grass stains and a huge grin. Did you see my goal, Grandpa? Saw it. Perfect shot. Will you teach me to kick better? I don't know much about soccer. That's okay. You know about trying hard. Summer in Phoenix was like living inside a furnace. By July, temperatures hit 115 degrees regularly. Heat that made the concrete too hot to touch and the car door handles burn your fingers. Elena's apartment had good air conditioning, but walking to work felt like punishment. How do people live here? I asked Dave during a particularly brutal afternoon. You adapt, he said, or you move somewhere else. The hardware store stayed busy with people fixing air conditioners and replacing sun-damaged everything. I learned about desert landscaping, pool maintenance, the specific ways Arizona heat destroyed things that lasted years in other climates. Customers appreciated having someone who listened to their problems instead of just pointing toward aisles. A woman needed replacement parts for her husband's vintage Mustang. I spent an hour helping her find compatible alternatives. An elderly man wanted to fix his own garbage disposal instead of calling a plumber. I walked him through the process step by step. You should teach classes, Dave suggested. Basic home repair, automotive maintenance. People would pay for that kind of knowledge. Teaching. I hadn't thought about that since my Ford days, training new workers on transmission assembly. But these customers asked the same questions, made the same mistakes, needed the same patient explanations that at home. Michael was building a solar panel for his science fair project. He'd bought components online, but couldn't figure out why the voltage wasn't matching his calculations. Mind if I take a look? I asked that we spread the components across the kitchen table. Michael explained his design while I checked connections, tested circuits, spotted the crossed wires that were causing problems. How did you know to check that? He asked after we fixed it. Experience. 30 years of troubleshooting taught me to look for simple problems first. Could you teach me more about electronics? If you want to learn. Elena found us hunched over Michael's project at 9 p.m., soldering iron in my hand, while Michael took careful notes about voltage regulation. What's all this? She asked. Grandpa's teaching me about electrical systems, Michael said. Did you know he used to train people at Ford? Elena smiled. I didn't know that. Your grandfather's always been good at explaining complicated things. After Michael went to bed, Elena and I sat on her small balcony despite the heat. Phoenix stretched out below us, lights twinkling like a circuit board under desert stars. He's never had a male role model who could teach him practical things, she said. His father wasn't interested in that kind of hands-on learning. Michael's got a good brain. Just needs someone to show him how to use it. You're good for them, Dad. Good for all of us. I'd been in Phoenix 4 months, saved enough money to start looking for my own apartment. But sitting on Elena's balcony, thinking about Michael's science projects and Jessica's soccer games, I wasn't sure I wanted to leave. What if I stayed a little longer? I asked. Found a bigger place, somewhere with room for all of us. Elena was quiet for a long moment. You'd want to do that? If you'd have me. If the kids wouldn't mind sharing their grandfather permanently. They'd love it. I'd love it. She paused. But are you sure? You gave up a lot to come here. I thought about what I'd given up. A city that had forgotten me, jobs that didn't want me, an overpass where I'd learned to sleep on concrete. Compared to what I'd gained, family, purpose, a reason to get up every morning. It seemed like the best trade I'd ever made. I'm sure, I said. September brought the first hints that Phoenix had seasons. Temperatures dropping below 100 for the first time since I'd arrived. Jessica started 3rd grade, Michael began 8th grade, and Elena picked up extra shifts to save money for Christmas that I'd been promoted to assistant manager at the hardware store, which meant training new employees and handling customer complaints. Dave trusted me to open and close, manage inventory, deal with the problems that required someone who knew the difference between can't and won't. You ever think about management training? He asked one afternoon. Corporate's always looking for experienced people who understand retail. At my age, experience doesn't have an expiration date. You're 64, not 94. The idea intrigued me, not because I wanted to climb corporate ladders, but because it represented something I'd thought was over, the possibility of advancement, of building instead of just maintaining. At home, routines had solidified into something that felt permanent. I helped with homework while Elena worked late, drove Jessica to soccer practice and Michael to robotics club, cooked dinner 3 nights a week, managed laundry and grocery shopping, handled the small maintenance tasks that kept a household running. You don't have to do everything, Elena said one evening, finding me replacing a leaky faucet in the bathroom. I like being useful. You're more than useful. You're indispensable. The word stayed with me. Indispensable. After months of feeling invisible, unwanted, disposable, it was almost too much to believe that Michael's science fair project won 2nd place at the regional competition. He insisted I come to the awards ceremony, introduced me to his teachers as my grandfather who taught me about electrical engineering. You must be proud, one teacher said. Michael talks about you all the time. Proud didn't cover it. This boy who'd been politely skeptical when I arrived was now explaining circuit theory to classmates, crediting his grandfather for teaching him to think like an engineer instead of just memorizing formulas. Jessica made the select soccer team, which meant practices 4 times a week and tournaments on weekends. I became the designated driver, sitting in Arizona heat while she ran drills and scrimmaged with girls twice her determination. Why does Grandpa come to everything? Another parent asked Elena during one particularly hot practice. Because he wants to, Elena said. And because he can. Such a simple thing. Being available when family needed you. But it had been impossible when I was homeless, difficult when I was working warehouse shifts, and now it felt like the most important job I'd ever had. The apartment hunt intensified in October. Elena and I looked at 3-bedroom places, calculating whether our combined income could handle the rent increase. Dave offered to write a recommendation letter, emphasizing my reliability and potential for advancement. The kids could have their own rooms, Elena said. Walking through a duplex in Tempe, you could have an actual bedroom instead of the couch. The duplex was clean, affordable, close to good schools. A place where we could spread out, have friends over, live like a normal family instead of temporary house guests. What do you think? Elena asked that I thought about the overpass in Detroit, about men like Marcus who were still sleeping on concrete while I was debating bedroom sizes and school districts. Thought about how arbitrary salvation could be, how thin the line was between desperation and stability. I think we should take it. I said that we moved in November. The kids excited about decorating their own spaces. Elena relieved to have more room for the life we were building together. I had a bedroom with a window, a closet for clothes that no longer lived in garbage bags. Space for the first new furniture I'd bought in years. That night, lying in my own bed in my own room, I called the Catholic Charities office in Detroit to check on Marcus. Sarah answered, remembered me from the transitional housing program. Marcus Williams? I'm sorry, Ben. He died in January. Pneumonia. The cold got him. I hung up and cried for the man who'd taught me to survive, who'd helped me pitch my first 10 under the highway and never got his own break. The difference between Marcus and me wasn't effort or virtue. It was timing, luck, and a daughter who could afford a bus ticket. Christmas in Phoenix felt strange and good. Palm trees wrapped in lights, warm enough for shorts. Jessica wanted a soccer ball, Michael asked for parts to build a robot, and Elena hoped for a few days off. For the first time in 18 months, I had real money. Earned, not charity. Dave gave me a bonus and hinted at management opportunities. I felt like I was moving forward. What do you want for Christmas, Grandpa? Jessica asked as we decorated a small tree. Work clothes, I said. That night Elena asked, do you regret Detroit? I regretted the pain I'd caused, especially lying about being homeless. But if losing everything led me here, surrounded by family, maybe it was worth it. Elena said, you fought your way back. It hadn't felt like fighting then. More like falling and learning to climb again. But maybe that was fighting at 64. Helping Jessica with fractions became a quiet lesson. Life doesn't come in whole numbers. Michael asked if I lived with them because I got a fraction of my old life. Something like that, I said. I thought I wanted my old life back. Turned out I needed a different life. New Year's Eve we stayed up until midnight for the first time. Jessica hugged me and said, "Happy New Year, Grandpa." It felt like permission to hope. Spring brought soccer seasons and robotics meets. I joined Dave's management training, classes twice a week, a possible store in 2 years. At 64, I learned inventory software and profit margins. Elena worried I didn't have to keep climbing mountains, but I wanted to prove Ford hadn't been the end of my productive years. That MY Mesa's store exceeded projections. Customers liked that I listened. Corporate noticed. Scottsdale was next, bigger, higher expectations. At home, Michael built robots with ultrasonic sensors. Jessica scored twice at the state tournament and drew scout attention. I covered the hotel costs. Elena resisted, but I wanted to help the kids seize opportunities. 2 years later, I barely recognized the man who'd stepped off the Greyhound. The Scottsdale store was mine. 12 employees, 6-figure goals, talk of regional expansion. Michael received offers from specialized schools. Jessica joined the Olympic Development Program. Elena started seeing David, a respiratory therapist who fit with our life without making me feel awkward. That we moved to a 4-bedroom in Chandler. Sunday dinners became ritual, Elena cooking, David helping, the kids arguing over robots and soccer. I told them about Michigan, the assembly line, the plant closing, sleeping in my car. "Were you scared?" Michael asked. "Terrified," I said. "But being scared doesn't mean giving up." In my workshop, Michael built a Father's Day frame. A photo from Jessica's tournament with his caption, "Grandpa Ben, the man who taught us that starting over isn't giving up. It's just changing direction." Standing under Arizona stars. I thought of Marcus and the men still sleeping on concrete. The difference between them and me wasn't character. It was family, timing, and luck meeting effort. Luck without effort is nothing. Luck paired with people willing to help can become permanence. Tonight, with a key to my own home, a job that mattered, and a family who chose to love me despite my failures, I was exactly where I belonged. That I would not waste it. I would keep rebuilding.